Helen here is the owner and director of Orphans Press, and she's going to tell us all about it. Thank you very much.
I'm the co-owner and director. That's really important to say. Andy over there is the other half.
Andy, I apologise for cutting you out of it.
This goes well.
Oh, right. He's the backroom boy, and Sheila next to him is my sister, who's on cake duty, and she works for Orphans, so it still is a family business. Sheila's been with us for a long time. I'm not going to talk that much about Orphans Press actually, because it's just his whole life, Henry Stanley Newman's life is very, very interesting, which I hadn't realised, if I'm honest.
Would you mind speaking up?
Oh, can you not hear me?
I'm deaf in my old age.
Oh, okay, fine. I'm going to talk a little bit about Orphans Press. I'm going to talk about Orphans Homes, but actually I think we need a bit of an introduction to Henry Stanley Newman, because he was so interesting. And can you hear me now? Yes. Can you hear me now? Yeah. When Margaret said about Quaker Family History Society coming to Leominster to learn about Quakers, I thought, oh, that's quite nice. I've no idea why Leominster would be special with Quakers, but it's quite nice them coming here. But then I thought I'll start looking into a bit more about it, and actually Henry Stanley Newman wasn't just important to Leominster, he was important nationally and actually internationally, and not just within Quakers, but within the broader religious groups as well as, and so it's quite, it is quite important, and I just hadn't quite realised that. Just had some revelations from Peter's speech as well. Like Peter, I'm not a Quaker, and actually not like Peter, I'm not a historian either. And the thing that he mentioned was Henry Newman, his uncle. They do just look alike. I get them mixed up, but they are very, very alike, and that's probably why Henry Stanley put the middle name in and was called Henry Stanley. But all the way through the books, the annual reports of the Orphans Homes and the Orphans Press are these beautiful illustrations, and we've got lots. Jeffrey?
One there.
One there?
Yep.
Yeah. We've got lots of them, and they are stunning photograph illustrations of the children, of scenes, of the printing press, and we think, well I think anyway, so let's make it fact, that perhaps his uncle did them, because he was around until early 20th century, you said, didn't you, Peter? So, yeah. So brilliant. And actually what they did is they only had so many, and then they repeated them. They used them quite a few times. So I'm really excited about that and really interested. So I can go home now because I've discovered something new. Apparently he was born in Liverpool. So Josiah must have got up somehow that he was born in Liverpool. And then he went and was an apprentice. This is Henry Stanley. Henry Stanley. Then he was an apprentice at a grocer's down south somewhere, big Quaker grocers down south. He went to school with lots of other fairly influential Quakers, so there's George Cadbury, there's Stanley Pumphrey, and actually I think he might have had a Neil or a Southall in the school as well, but he went to school with some influential Quakers. Then he came back to Leominster to join the grocer's business, and by the end you'll realise that the grocer's business in Leominster is not going to be enough for Henry Stanley Newman. So that's when, he had time, and he had time in his hand, I suppose, and thinking. He was very intellectual, he was also very, very godly, and the thing that I always thought when we bought Orphans Press back in '97, always thought he was a very good man. Henry Stanley was a good man because of what he did in the early days, but I didn't realise, I assumed he was a very religious and good man, and perhaps fairly staid, but actually, reading through, he was very broad-minded, very gentle, very kind, very caring, and actually had a good sense of humour as well, so he was amazing. I don't know how. just lost my thread slightly. Where was I? What was I talking about? Thank you, Andy. That's right. So, well done. Yes, that's right. So he came and he was a grocer here. The adult school was the first thing that he got involved with because, as Peter said, his father said to him, I think it's a good idea, let's get these adult schools set up. And he wanted Henry Stanley to teach Bible, whatever you call them, Bible stories to the adults. He didn't feel he was that well equipped to do that, so he taught them maths and English instead. And he was very young then, he was only in his early 20s. He taught them maths and English and then went away and read the Bible constantly. Apparently throughout his life he's always reading Bibles and making notes about the Bible. And so he started learning, getting really involved in the Bible. And that was 1858, he was in the adult school, and one of the classics which he said he learnt more from the adults at the adult school than they learnt from him, which is obviously not right, but actually it just tells you something about the man. 1859 then, he set up the Leominster Tract Association, which, these are beautiful. The Leominster Tract Association they printed and published little stories, little pamphlets, and they are stories to get across his Christian values. He just felt it was very important that people needed to be educated, especially people who couldn't afford at that time. So, say 1858, they couldn't afford books. So quite a few of these actually were given away. Some were charged at a tiny amount. They look really pretty, and some of them are, there are 7 different series. Some are for children, very light-hearted, but always with that Christian message through. So he started doing that in 1859, and they distributed 14 million copies altogether of these. So it's huge, it is really properly huge. And at the time when he started, they were being printed down in London. So if we think about the timing, so that was in 1859, so he was just starting to he felt he was starting to get his message, out. At the same time, and I'm definitely not equipped to start talking about this, at the same time he spoke at a Quaker meeting, and at the time apparently it was not that well looked upon. You know, you had to be very confident and very brave to speak at a Quaker meeting. And when he did, he was very nervous about it, and at the end of it, his father was very impressed and said, right, you know, his father knew that was one of his callings, and that probably was one of his most important things. It was his calling to the ministry, and he started then becoming a very well-known preacher, and he went all over the country preaching. He went to America preaching. Then he went and got involved with missionaries. He so he's preaching all around the country. Then he went to India, and he went to so he got a book that he then wrote and published about his travels to India, and then he went to Tanzania. Now it's Tanzania, and it was Zanzibar and Pemba, and he was very interested in the slavery, and then how the transition of slavery and all the problems of slavery, and how the teaching of Christ could help with that transition. And he was fundamental to setting up the Friends Society, the National Friends Society for Missionaries. So again, something I had no idea until I think it was this week that I found that out. So not just Leominster, you know, this is a national thing, and there's some really interesting articles about that. So you need to know that whilst he's now about to do the Orphans' Homes and the Orphans Printing Press, he's got all this going on. He's travelling all over the place. The nicest thing is that he travels to India in 1899, and he brings back a monkey for the children for Christmas. Not for Christmas, obviously, they aren't for Christmas, but there's a lovely one when the children are playing with the monkey at Christmas in the Orphans' Home. So that's just a sort of a bit of a link between the two. Cute, isn't it? So he's got all of this going on in his life. After the Tract Association and back in Leominster now, so this is 1859. I better mention his wife actually. Which is terrible, I'm sorry about that. 1863, he married Mary Anna Pumphrey, who was the sister of his good friend from school, and she was from Worcester. She's not mentioned massively, but she is, you can tell from some of the stuff that she's very important in his life, and helps him. Apparently it's the two of them really that do all the work in the orphans' homes in particular. She's very influential in the orphans' home. So married Mary Anna 1863. 1869 is when the first orphans' homes was set up, and he basically wanted to help destitute children from all over the country, but mainly from the inner cities. So it wasn't about, there were some Leominster and Herefordshire children, but he really wanted to help children, destitute children, which meant you had no mother, no father, no means of support. And you had to fill in a form. The guardians or whoever had to fill in a form to say, yes, died, no, I haven't got any money, or all this, but he really wanted people to be able to, in that community. So if there's a child coming from Birmingham, he was looking for the people of Birmingham to help support that child in the home for the first year. So you'll see lots of interesting things about different little bits of money and bits of furniture and all sorts coming from different areas, because that was part of the child comes, but we need some money. So that started in 1869, and I think I was going to get Geoffrey, who is from Brightwells, who are one of our old Orphans Press, one of our very old customers, is Geoffrey, but it's Brightwells, who are an auctioneering company. This is relevant. And Orphans Press have been printing for Brightwells, RB&B, for
Since the 1920s.
Since the 1920s. So a long time. And Geoffrey is a friend in my terms. And because he's an auctioneer, he's got a really good voice. And he's nice as well. And he's going to read out a few extracts from us from the homes, because the beauty of the stuff is that they did an annual, because he was good at work, they did an annual report every year. So we've got stuff every year and talking about the orphans' homes and some lovely snippets. So Geoffrey is going to read there.
A small beginning. All the children at the orphans' home at Leominster have lost both father and mother and have come to us from all parts of the country, north, south, east and west. There are children from the great manufacturing towns of the north of England, from Birmingham and the Midlands, from London and the eastern counties, from Southampton, Penzance and Wales. We had a very small beginning and did not commence by building houses, but rented an empty house for £15 a year. A kind lady who had herself been an orphan from childhood offered to take care of the children, and our first orphan child was a girl named Annie Phillips. The orphan home was opened on the 20th of August 1869, and at Christmas we had 7 children. Their names were Annie, Arthur, Agnes, Albert, Anne, Teddy and Willie. They had no servant to wait on them, but if you called to see them some morning, you would find 2 little boys in aprons cleaning knives and forks or brushing shoes and looking as bright and as happy as though they were at play. 2 of the girls we might find making the beds upstairs, and another girl washing and dusting, while the 2 youngest are on the floor playing with a wooden horse that had lost both its head and tail. I saw the kind of friend who takes care of them pick up the youngest in her arms and ask him, "Whose little boy are you?" And he lisped, "Yours." "And why are you my boy?" she asked. "'Cause I love you," he said. So these orphans have someone now that cares for them and loves them, and we try to teach them that their Heavenly Father cares for them above all.
It's sweet, isn't it? Yeah. Sweet. And then you get this type of illustrations. I mean, it's just so sweet, these type of illustrations. This is a book which we will one day publish and reprint, and that's the stories of the orphans' homes. written by Henry Stanley Newman, and it's fabulous. It's full of that type of thing. But you start getting a flavour. I've got a picture of it of Annie somewhere, who's not the first orphan. You start getting a flavour of the homes and Henry. What's the next one? Yeah, Teddy. This is another story of Teddy. So you just mentioned Teddy was one of the first ones. This is a little bit about Teddy.
He came to us from Shoreditch in London with a printed direction around his shoulders. When he got to the station here, the matron asked him where his luggage was. "Have you a box, my boy?" "Oh yes," he said, "I've got a box." "And where is it?" "It is in my little bag." And he turned out a penny box of 9 pins, which, with a few biscuits, was all he had in the world. As soon as he reached his new home, he scampered all over the garden, over flower beds and all, and said there were no gardens like that in London. That is, he'd never seen any gardens there. Yep.
Stop. Stop. That was very good, Geoffrey. Next one. That was Teddy. Oh, you picked the wrong one. Teddy. Can't be trusted. I did only give him 2
She
minutes.
gave me these 3 minutes before she started.
Sorry about that, Teddy. Oh, that's right. And the boy. Here, that's it. You read so beautifully, though. Here's a little boy.
But you hand them to me.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
hand them
and then
to
I
you.
won't get them
Yeah,
wrong.
you won't.
Here's a little boy of 5 years old, just to hand from London. He's travelled by himself all the way from Paddington, but he was well labelled. Few parcels would go wrong if so fully directed. When we met him at the station, he'd evidently found friends on the journey, and the only trouble the boy seemed to have was that someone had put such a big apple into his pocket that he could not get it out again.
Right, so I've got a picture. See, now this could be Henry Newman. The illustration you see there of him with an apple or orange or something in it.
Shall I read on?
Yeah, sorry.
Here is a lad from Leeds. I don't know what we shall do with him. A kind lady has brought him all the way from Leeds herself. She found him neglected and forlorn and likely to go to the bad. One of the first tricks he tried on us was to get a kitchen knife and endeavour to cut off the tail of the boy's white rat. The boys rebelled against this and have kept a closer watch over him since.
Then this is just to give you a flavour of the presents and donations that came in.
You would be amused to see the way in which our house was furnished. The first article of furniture that was given us was a washing machine from Yorkshire. Another friend sent us a sewing machine from Birmingham. Others gave us chairs, a clock, a mangle and a table. Then followed scrapbooks, apples and various assortments of children's garments. One young friend wrote to us saying, "My sewing machine never goes quicker or more merrily when it is worked for the orphans." The poverty-stricken old woman in Ratcliffe said she should like to do something for the orphan and knit 2 pairs of warm socks for them. One of our Irish friends sent us warm words of encouragement and said he intended following our example and starting an orphan home himself. A number of presents of clothing have been a great help to us. Kind friends have plied their needles busily for us at Penzance, Waterford, Dublin, Kendal, London, Droitwich and Cirencester. A cotton spinner at Oldham sent us a valuable consignment of cotton goods. A lady at Uxbridge has several times sent 24 pairs of socks of her own knitting. A gentleman in Lancashire sent a number of little coats for the boys. Not unfrequently there was a ring at the door and a basket of apples or a pair of shoes or a couple of loaves of bread were handed in. The post one day brought an envelope enclosing 2 £5 notes, without any clue as to the sender, but simply the words, "A thank offering from an orphan." 3 little girls sent ½ a crown each, a portion of what they received in exchange for sugar in their tea.
Marvellous. So when they started off, they had a rented house and they just had a few children, but it was always the aim to build a home which would be split boys and girls, and it would have 40 children in it. And Peter showed you the picture of it early on, didn't he? I'm sure you did. Rylands. Was it in your or no? Okay, it's here, and I think we'll be going to it later. So that's what he built, and we built that in 1871 for the 40 children. He was you can start getting a feel for the man as he's writing that, and he was a very godly man, and he believed that prayer gave him all these things. I tried it this morning. My speech to be prepared, but it didn't work. But again, reading this now about the starting of the actual building of the orphans' homes is really good.
For months we'd been praying that the Lord would open out the way for us to obtain a plot of land for the orphan homes. There was one piece of land that seemed above all others, suited to our object, but we had no money to purchase it, and the gentleman who owned it refused to sell it. The ground was about 2.5 acres and stood high on the hillside just outside the town. It was on a main road and easily accessible. It was planted with apple trees and with a double row of larch trees in front. The Lord heard our prayers, and after many negotiations, the owner agreed on a price he would take for it. A friend who was interested in the work then came forward and most liberally offered to give us the whole amount. The deed was signed, the money paid, and the land was ours, under the care of 6 trustees. Then came the building of the houses. The Lord helped us at every step. William Johnson, an architect, came to visit us. He saw the land and went over it with us. He pointed out the right spot to build on and drew a pencil sketch of the proposed houses, arranging that the main windows should face the south so that the children might have an abundance of sunshine. Meanwhile, an uncle of 3 of the orphan children, who was an architect, kindly undertook freely to provide detailed plans of the buildings, one house for the boys and another for girls, each to hold 20 children. When these plans were prepared, they were placed in the builder's hands, who sent in an estimate to erect the 2 houses for £1,250. A circular was then issued, telling friends of our needs. Earnest prayer was offered to our Father in heaven that he would send us the money, and that we might not get into debt. And our prayers were abundantly answered. Money flowed in freely, and when we came at Christmas to cast up the accounts in our ledger to see how much had been sent to us towards the building fund, we found we had received £1,250, 13 shillings and 9pence.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So they got the money, they got into the home, so that was in 1871. But then, of course, that's not enough for Henry Stanley. He has to think about how he's going to fund these homes and also look after these children and give these children a trade. So in 1872, off he goes with 3 other people, which we don't know, but Peter's going to find out, I'm sure, at some stage. I'm sure one of them is a Southall, because as you mentioned, they had the Leominster Printing Company, so I bet it was a Southall that went with him. And off they went to Germany to look at a similar setup, where they were looking after children in homes, and they'd got different industries. And he loved the print setup, and he thought that was perfect. He was very clever, and there's one passage which says, on the way home, his brain was just working overtime as to how on earth he could get all this, how good this could be, and how it would all work together. Because obviously he was thinking, we sell and print thousands and thousands of these tracts, which are being printed in London at the moment. Straight away, I'll be printing those tracts, so I've got some income straight away. And he was thinking, great, I can get the children working in the press right away, and they're going to be learning a trade, and that's what he did. And again, Peter said he said where the press was set up. He set it up in Broad Street, got the kit going, and he and then hired foremen, so hired some men, but then the children worked alongside the men. They did some of the finishing work, and they learned a trade, basically. Just for a couple of years to start with, they were able to work their mornings, and then they were educated in the afternoons. And Cynthia asked me a question about if the children weren't Quakers, were they just, did they try and convert them to Quakers? But no, they didn't. They went to their schools, and they had a broad education and whatever religion they wanted. Anyway, so to start with, they were working in the Orphans Press in the mornings and the afternoons. 2 years later, the Education Act came in, and they weren't allowed to anymore, but they just worked in the evenings and the weekends. But he says on one of them in 1874 how the tone and the health of the children has improved, because now they're doing good work and they're happy doing their work, and then they go home and they can play around in the auctions and run around at home. So he believed it was great for them physically and mentally working in the homes, in the press. The press flourished actually, and from 1873 up until 1912, he died in 1912, it was actually contributing a big chunk of money to the orphans' home. Each annual report tells you how much the home has cost, what subscriptions come in, and what the press was earning. And the Orphans Press actually contributed every year, and without it, they wouldn't have survived, because subscriptions dropped off as friends. The initial friends from 1869 started dying. By 1890s, the subscriptions were dropping off. So that's when actually the press income was really fundamental and essential, and it kept it running. In 1 year, it bought all of the children brand new iron bedsteads at some ridiculous cost. So it's fundamental that the two things work together. So he's busy doing all this. He's taking the children for walks on a Saturday when he's at home. He's off doing his missionary work. He's all over the place. But then he still has time in 1911. Do I mean 1911? I don't. Editing the Friend. I mean in 1892. In 1891 there was a meeting, and the Friend magazine, so you'll know the Friend. It's been monthly up until 1891, and it had been struggling a little bit because I think the Quakers at the time had become a little bit narrow and a little bit insular. They'd been struggling. There was a meeting in 1891, and they really wanted Henry Stanley Newman to become the new editor because of his breadth of vision. So in 1892 he started editing the Friend. That's right, and he edited the Friend until he died in 1912, and he was still editing it. So the week before he died, he put his last issue to bed of the Friend in 1912. He was also very clever because the Friend then got printed at Orphans Printing Press. I'm absolutely sure, well I know, that it's not relevant to him at the time. It wasn't a reason for doing it, but actually Orphans Printing Press then really benefited from it, because the tracts by that time were making him no money. He just wanted to deliver his things, and the tracts were costing the Orphans Press a lot of money, but the Friend saved the Orphans Press. So he edited it from 1892 right up to his death in 1912. Then the next editor carried on with Orphans Press until 1932, so I'm skipping now to the Orphans Press. So until 1932, but then he retired and they passed it on to another one, and he didn't. He decided to take the printing to London. I'm still cross with him, he was dead ages ago. He took the printing to London, and Orphans Press had a real struggle. They had to split from the homes because they could no longer help the homes, and that was always their intention. And a group of trustees, which is another job for Peter to find out who they are, a group of trustees took it on as a private thing, still charitable, with the aim of trying to get it back on its feet. Now it's lost the Friend, get it back on its feet so that it could then still help the homes. Unfortunately, though they tried for a couple of years, it didn't happen. And then from there, in 1934, it went into proper private ownership. It was bought by somebody, and then it just became a private enterprise as Orphans Printing Press. Competing, interestingly, with Leominster Printing Company, who was the Southall. Really interesting, actually. But at the time, the Leominster Printing Company was very much printing local stuff, because at the time, they printed our B&B, didn't they? Russell Ward and Bright, the auctioneer, so it was the Leominster Printing Company. So they did all the local stuff, whereas we did really more of the religious side of things. It wasn't too much of a competitor. Further down the line, though, in 1970s, Orphans Press bought out Leominster Printing Company. That's when my auntie owned it, and she liked buying things, so she bought them. She bought Arthur. Where's Arthur? She bought Arthur Davis. She bought Davis Brothers, and then she bought Tenby Press. So she'd got these big ideas of printing, so she bought those 3 companies. I'm running you forward now, and then what did she do? 25 years or so, and then we bought it. 1997. That's enough about us. Okay, but I just want to show you how it all interlinks. I'm now going to go back to the homes, which I think is much more interesting, and it's about his care for the children. So what have you done with it, Geoffrey? Okay, because it's about people. He was about people, really. He wasn't about business. It's about people. And this is a bit more. This is about the children leaving.
The swallows are birds of passage, sailing away to their new home in the autumn, to return again to us in the springtime. And so it is with our children. Each year some leave us, never to return. 3 one year, 5 another year, and 7 another year. They find situations, and as the older ones leave us, little ones are taking their places. But while they're in the homes, they have their holiday times. Cricket and bathing are great favourites in the summer, and many other country rambles the children enjoy.
Yeah.
And then in the winter comes the good cheer of Christmas time. Have you ever watched the little child's face as she comes up in her turn to a bran tub full of children's treasures to put in her hand and draw forth her lot? I have watched it many a time. When Christmas comes, there are grand times at the orphan homes, and there's nothing suits them better than a bran tub full of hidden treasures.
So you get the feeling of the man. I'm sure there wasn't much in the bran tub except the 1 year when there was a monkey, but the rest of the time there wasn't very much. But you can feel the love. And then that's a song, isn't it? Feel the love.
Yes, feel it.
That is.
Shall we sing it?
No.
No.
So the next thing about, so he's looking after these children till the age of 14, 15, and he knows he's got to get them ready for their life to come, and he knows they're going to have to work hard, these children. So I like this message.
It's a serious business when the time comes for a lad to start in life. The home finds him a box with lock and key, and with his bit of luggage he turns his back on his old associates. But we must first go and see if the situation is likely to suit him. So the boy sits quietly in the railway carriage for half an hour, and then begins, "Sir, what sort of a man is it we're going to see?" "I really do not know, Tom. We must find out when we get there." The train stops and we tread the streets to a well-packed shop containing a most promiscuous assemblage of hardware goods. "I have brought the boy you wrote to me about. I thought you had better see him yourself and talk to him and ask him any questions you like before you agree to take him. We wish to apprentice him for 4 years and recommend a little increase in his wages each year. But of course, we do not expect him to get much at first, if he can have a comfortable home. We carefully inquire into the character of the master. He likes the look of the boy takes a fancy to him, and the bargain is struck. A few weeks later, 2 ladies call at the shop and inquire, "Is Tom in?" The boy appears. He's quite unprepared for visitors, but is well pleased to see his old friends. "May we take him to get a new top coat?" inquire the ladies. Then there are many questions asked as the boy walks along by their side. "How do you like your place, Tom? You must keep yourself clean. What do you do in the evenings?" Tom has his master's great dog with him that looks up in his face like an old acquaintance. And Tom has quite as many questions on his mind. "What are the boys doing at home? May I come home at Christmas? Are there any more boys gone out yet? How are the rabbits? Have the pigeons any eggs? And are there any more canaries?"
Fabulous. And there's lots of children. I think over 300 children pass through. And so it just gives you a real flavour of it. We're going to finish with, it's lovely how everything's circular. Thanks, Geoffrey.
Right.
You done. Round of applause, Geoffrey. Thank you. Just going to finish with Cynthia Cynthia Prior, who you'll find out a bit later. Cynthia's a local Quaker, and she's actually in charge of the burial ground now, the Quaker burial ground, that we'll go to later on, where Henry Stanley Newman, amongst other people, is buried. But interestingly, Cynthia's grandmother was an orphan in the orphans' home and came from Birmingham. So we just have a little bit of a snippet, if that's okay, from Cynthia.
Over there. Okay, but I want to go over there to get hold of him. Okay. Yeah, just very quickly, you may look at me and think, grandmother? No, surely great-great-grandmother or something. No, seriously, my grandmother. Born in 1868 in Birmingham, became an orphan by the time she was 10 in 1878, and somehow ended up here in the orphanage, or in children's homes in Leominster, from 1878 to 1883. And I knew my grandmother. She died when I was about that big, but I do just remember her. So in a sense, I'm sort of the link. One of the lovely things was that, as Helen suggested, they certainly kept in touch with their old boys and their old girls. And if I can just pop back over here. If I read you pop on the top of here, it's an extract from the Orphanage Annual Report for 1899. And it says, "We recently had a very pleasant visit from one of our old girls, who had left us nearly 16 years, and after being 9 years in her last situation, is to be married from her master's home. We have since received the bride cake from her wedding. We heartily congratulate her and commend such an instance of faithful service to our boys and girls, both past and present." And that is a picture of my grandparents on their wedding day in 1898, September the 17th, 1898. By that time, my grandmother had left the orphanage 16 years before. She had gone, first of all, to work for a vicar in Bristol as a nursery maid. She had then gone to Shrewsbury School, looking after children, and had gone from there to work for a solicitor as a nursery governess in Banbury in Oxfordshire. And there she had met my grandfather, and the rest, as they say, is history. Except that one lovely little snippet, on that day my grandfather was told that it was lovely that they were getting married because they were actually both 30, which was quite old, but they would never have any children because grandmother was very delicate. Well, the picture on the wall over there is my grandparents again in September 1936, along with their 10 children. Just finally, I think Peter mentioned the temperance movement, signing the pledge. That is my grandmother's pledge, signed Caroline Elleman, 26th of August, 1882, when she was in the orphanage. And that's a picture of her somewhere in the 1890s, a woman of about 25, 26, 27. So I'll leave those over there. You're welcome to have a look at them.
Just to sum up then, hopefully it's given you a feel for the man. He was genuinely a wonderful man. Hopefully it's given you a feel for that. And there's lots of information here for you to have a look at while you're having your sandwich. I want to tell you the last thing, which is a link to Avril. He's influenced Orphans Press even today, because last year we published our first book again for the first time since he published back in the late 19th century, and it was definitely something that we had in our minds. He used to publish books. We've always loved printing books. What about publishing a book? And when I had a meeting with Avril, and it was a book, and it was about a Quaker, that just sealed the deal. So again, we've come full circle, and now we're publishing books.